All right. Well, we are being invited to argue about race in order to hand power to warmongers. Does that sound familiar? That is exactly how Barack Obama was reelected, because we were told that the opposition to him was because everyone else was racist. No one ever brought it up that he was a warmonger in the Middle East.
That he killed innocent civilians, bombed indiscriminately all throughout the Middle East.
That was never brought up by any side. Go ahead.
First president to assassinate 2 U.S. citizens with no due process. I think that's an important one.
That never came up.
And he won the Nobel Peace Prize.
It was always about race, right? The conversation around Hillary Clinton was around gender, not that she started wars in Libya. So here is another sort of racial distraction, in my view, sort of taking away the conversation that should be happening around the war in Israel. Because people who criticize Israel right now continue to be called anti-Semites. It's kind of a trump card. Like, oh, you don't think Israel should be defending itself? Anti-Semite, that's a trump card that ends the conversation, right? And Congress is now grandstanding about it. This is about a right to criticize Israel's response in Gaza, which is an atrocity in a reaction to an atrocity on October 7th. It's saving no one. It's helping no one. It's making the lives of Jewish people harder and straight out taking the lives of Palestinians. So let's look at how the silencing of this narrative is playing out in Ivy League schools as a tricky trap about race, hiding a real conversation about war. So last week, top university presidents from Harvard, UPenn, and MIT testified about disciplinary practices on college campuses due to the threat of Jewish students in the wake of the war in Israel. Now, these clips went viral when these women refused to say that threats to Jewish students were punishable by their codes of conduct, because you can't threaten people. You can't say incitable speech, right? Let's go blow up whatever. Let's go get these people. You cannot do that. It does not matter the race. You can't say that.
It's illegal.
Right. It's illegal and also against the codes of conduct. What Congress wanted from them is saying only attacking these groups of people is wrong, and that any criticism of Israel is an attack on these people, and you must say that and write it down. Now, I want to set up this clip because the representative who is leading this is a heinous person named Heinous Performance here. I don't know what she's like personally.
That's a terrible name to be born with.
What?
Heinous Performance.
That's not her name.
Oh, I thought her name was Heinous.
Saying this is Heinous Performance by person named
Senator Heinous?
Elise Stefanik. In my view, acting in the role of Dolores Umbridge, and I am going to make this connection. So Potter fans, hang on here. She's furthering the authoritarian regime that forbids critiques of Zionism. She mistakenly says that an intifada is a call for genocide of Jews. That's not true. She's lacking context here. She's just specifically just not doing her studying. I'm going to play it, and we'll probably interrupt it a few times because it's a bit long. But watch this grandstanding here that has launched an entire conversation and distraction from war.
At MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules?
That would be investigated as harassment if pervasive and severe.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
Okay, let's pause for a second, if you don't mind.
It is
what she's saying Nobody has said they're calling for, she's not referring to any specific call for a genocide. She's referring to an intifada, which she interprets as a call for the genocide of Jews. And what these university presidents are saying is, we can't say intifada is not allowed because universities are supposed to be a place for free speech. And so they're hesitating to say that because, one, they have not actually heard that. Two, if somebody were actually inciting that, of course that would be punishable. And three, they want to leave space for people who want to call for Palestinians to rise up for their own freedom. Rise up for your own freedom does not automatically mean genocide of the oppressor, right? Can we agree that? Yes?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And so we're just leaving space to have this conversation. And she's saying, oh, no, we can't have the conversation. Even saying intifada is a call for a genocide is a trump card, the same way that criticizing the Zionist government is anti-Semitic. She's asking them to put into law and practice a trump card that shuts down the conversation that needs to be happening about war. So watch her feeling pretty stinking good about herself, thinking she's got them because of this. Sorry, we can keep going.
Decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
Yes
speech
or no?
becomes, if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide?
That's so stupid. She's
The
so
speech
stupid
is not
for saying
harassment. This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's
Like she
code of
doesn't
conduct?
understand. Like she just doesn't understand that, yeah, there needs to be some kind of space to call for a rising up against an oppressor. That Palestinian students should say this. Go ahead, Philip.
And that's like not calling for a ceasefire is the opposite of that then. That's calling for a genocide on the other side.
Absolutely right. Yeah, and so you could interpret that Israeli students or any Zionist supporters saying no to ceasefire would be calling for a genocide of Palestinians. Yep, absolutely, that could be interpreted that way, but that is never mentioned here.
When it comes to bullying and harassment.
Yeah, okay, let's let her go on. And just to see how stupid she is, let's let her go on a little bit longer.
Oh, sorry.
Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes. And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, targeted at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of antisemitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate
let's cut her
Harvard's
off,
rules
'cause
of
she's
bullying
just so
and harassment?
obnoxious. She really thinks that she's got these ladies. Like, you don't understand your own free speech policies, and you don't understand what an intifada is, and you don't understand the context here that, Jews are the ones being victimized on campus only, which we know is not true. We've seen Jewish and Palestinian and Middle Eastern students alike all being targeted. So I think I can't help it because I see her in this tweed jacket and she is promoting this behavior that's advancing the agenda of authoritarianism, and I can't not see this. So I put her picture side by side with Dolores Umbridge, because if you know your Potter, you know that Dolores Umbridge is an archetype of a powerful politician who shuts down questioning of all government narratives that are inconvenient, and she is playing this role beautifully. That is what's on display. She's asking the university presidents to condemn students' rights to be critical of Israel and couching it in anti-Semitic racism. And she's backing them into a corner and not allowing them to explain. Now, if you were to push and say, well, a call to an intifada is not the same as a call for genocide to Jews, you should not say this, but we are a university where free speech is important. We should talk about these things, but you cannot incite violence. She's not hearing this because you cannot question the Ministry of Magic, or in this case, the U.S. government's support of Israel. After this display of sheer ego, these ladies were hung out to dry to appease big donors. Here, Penn donor pulled out $100 million gift over anti-Semitism furor, and it just kept going. Now, Penn President Liz McGill apologized the next day. Didn't help any. She still was ousted. She explained that she had been erroneously focused on the constitutional right to free speech, and she apologizes for that. Here is part of her apology.
There was a moment during yesterday's congressional hearing on anti-Semitism when I was asked if a call for the genocide of Jewish people on our campus would violate our policies. In that moment, I was focused on our university's longstanding policies aligned with the U.S. Constitution, which say that speech alone is not punishable. I was not focused on, but I should have been, the irrefutable fact that a call for genocide of Jewish people is a call for some of the most terrible violence human beings can perpetrate. It's evil, plain and simple. I want to be clear. A call for genocide of Jewish people is threatening, deeply so. It is intentionally meant to terrify a people who have been subjected to pogroms and hatred for centuries and were the victims of mass genocide in the Holocaust.
Okay, but who said that? Who called for a genocide of Jews by being critical of the Israeli government? Because anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, and we have to commit to knowing the difference.
A number of people in the chat room just said that exact same phrase. Being anti-Zionist is not anti-Semitic.
Right. And so saying that you want an intifada, meaning you want these people to free themselves of an oppression from Israel, is not anti-Semitic. Right. And so, yes, they could have explained themselves better. But the problem is that universities have no longer become a place for free speech. So when they're saying, well, we have to allow free speech on both sides, but we do want people to be safe, we don't allow inciting violence, they didn't say that because it would ring hollow in the last decade or more of not protecting free speech, of canceling professors, of shutting down things that might hurt people's feelings, of, only one side of the political agenda. And so now Liz McGill has resigned, and the other two, there are calls for their resignation from Congress now. Here is a bipartisan House resolution led by Umbridge asking for these women to resign, the two who have not. They're saying it has bipartisan support because, of course, they're all warmongers. It would not be law. It would just be Congress adopting a resolution that they want. Can you imagine Congress saying who should and shouldn't run universities? Right now, that's what they're doing.
That's the problem I have is, so they're there to govern. How the hell is this governing? What is it like? They're not there to regulate all of our behaviors across the board, across the country. It's to like freaking govern.
Right.
Pass some bills.
That's
do some
news
laws.
to them.
Do what you're there for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this comes after Harvard has voted not to oust Harvard's president, Claudine Gay. This week, the board voted that they would support her, even though there is this backlash. The public wanted her head too, and when Harvard voted that it would support her, I mean, what did she do? Is she said, no, we want to protect free speech, right? And that threats to violence are context specific, and that threats to violence are already not allowed. And we can't only protect one group. That's what she's saying. She did not say that eloquently, but that's what they all were committing to. Now the media has come for her saying that she plagiarized her work. Here comes from the New York Post. You can see how this is playing out, right? They expected this black woman to shut down criticism of Israel, and she refused. And because of that, now she's being presented as this unworthy affirmative action baby, that she doesn't deserve to be there because she cheated. She betrayed this code of marginalized groups not standing up for one another. And now she must pay. Well, here's some examples of the plagiarism that the Post found. It's paraphrasing, to be sure. There are a few of them. I'll just sort of play them throughout the screen without reading them to you. And you should decide for yourself if this is plagiarism. It certainly seems like she should have attributed these things, but she's hardly passing them off as her own research. None of this is her thesis or her conclusion that she's taking from somebody else. These are supporting points in her academic work that she found clearly from other resources and didn't. She says, I can go back and just properly attribute those things. Is it embarrassing? Yes. Is it plagiarizing? I don't know. But here's the question. Would a white person be punished harsher for this? Maybe. Does this mean she doesn't deserve that job? I don't think that this is the thing that you lynch whether or not she deserves that job. Now, is Harvard choosing who to support and who not to based on ideology? Well, clearly they've been doing that for decades, right? Does it mean that this one person is who it lynches on? Universities have mopped themselves into a corner with this. If they put their foot down now, full stop, and say, well, we support free speech and intifada is allowed under that paradigm, we wouldn't have this discussion, but they have no reputation for that. And of course, Jewish students have been targeted, as well as Muslim students, and that is already not allowed. We showed you this video from just a few weeks ago. This is a Jewish student at Harvard who was walking to class and was harassed. This is, again, not allowed.
Yeah, that's illegal.
Yeah.
A Jewish student's like walking to class and people surround him and like try to basically want to beat the shit out of him.
It would still be illegal if he were Chinese.
Yeah.
It would still be illegal if the other people were Japanese. It would be illegal no matter what.
Right.
It would be not allowed.
I think what's rich, though, is these universities are now pretending that they're a bastion of free speech, right? Like, no,
Yeah.
we've always been a bastion of, over the past 20 years, we've really been a bastion of free speech. In fact, it's total bullshit because they've created free speech zones within the university. Like there's like a circle that you could stand in. We covered this in my time at Fox, we covered these universities going woke and creating like free speech zones where you could go and stand in a circle. And then you could say in that circle whatever you wanted. And it was like behind an outhouse and hidden behind campus, you know?
Yeah.
These universities aren't free speech zones. Like they're really trying to protect that. That's such a canard.
It rings very hollow, right? So even if there was a sincere, and I think that probably academics want to say, well, we definitely do have empathy for Palestinian students who feel this way, and we want to leave space for them. It rings hollow because that's not what universities have done. They've been protecting small, these groups of people. So Jewish students are like, well, you got to protect us because you protect everybody. And so we can't have our feelings hurt. And so then there's no right for Palestinian students to feel that way too, or else you protect both sides of the coin. It's a losing battle. Here's what Jonathan Haidt says about this. He's the author of The Coddling of the American Mind. He says, the only way to end anti-Semitism on campus is to end identitarianism. You can't be satisfied with university presidents who say, oh, we'll have a new center on anti-Semitism or whatever. It's not going to have an effect as long as there's a critical mass of students who are taught to see everything through oppressor-victim glasses, and which punching up is virtuous, and when the punching is not, even when the punching is not metaphorical. So what I think here is that this is all governing around a protection of Israel so that we can't have a real discussion about Israel's response. This is about clamping down on free speech, and it's new to universities because they have not done this. So how can we trust what their intention is? I don't know, right? But should we be arguing about the race of the victims or the people at this point, or should we be really talking about the war? And as uncomfortable as it is, it seems that universities should be a place where we can talk about the war.
And that's why, in my opinion, the rights have to be kept on the individual level, because as soon as you give rights to a whole group, you have to take rights from the individual against that group, right? So if people are doing bad things, there's already tons of laws in place to do something to them. But when they give all these groups these special rights, then it takes the individual right away from protesting or saying anything about that group whatsoever. You can't even say anything like somewhat negative about this situation right now, or you're anti-Semite.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It shuts down. I think people who throw those terms around, though, are pretty ignorant, because anyone who throws a term around like that, it means they haven't done the homework, and it shuts down conversation.
Or they don't want you to continue to discuss it.
Right. This is what Tucker has always said when people would say, you're a racist, you're an anti-Semite. He's like, shut up. It's like, because what it does is it simply just shuts down conversation. It totally shuts down conversation, and you haven't done your homework.
Yeah.
And also, it's interesting. When these politicians get up there and grandstand in front of the cameras, don't be fooled by that, guys. Don't be fooled by that. These guys are bought and sold and paid for by these lobbying groups. So Stefanik, of course, makes tens of thousands of dollars from Israel.
Also, she will fundraise on this.
Oh, she already has. And by the way, she's already raised tens of thousands of dollars from pro-Israel lobbying groups that funnel money to her.
Yeah.
So when she's up there grandstanding and looking like she's just making so much money off of it. Follow the money, people. Don't be stupid. Wake up on this if you're falling
we've
for
become
that.
we're being governed by like the social media Congress. Like, they don't care about policy. They don't care about their platforms. They care about sound bites that you can put on like TikTok to get their popularity up. It's like it's become purely popularity, but it's all sound bites. They don't actually care what the outcome of any of that is. They're just like, ooh, look, I got this sound bite of me roasting this person, and that's all they care about.
But
that's what we've come to.
And watching the reaction to that clip, where she really was feeling her ego inflated by "I really got them," and you watch other people on Twitter who just took the bait. They're like, oh my God, you are anti-Semitism. How can you say that? And they're allowing themselves to sell themselves the idea that other people don't get it like you do. Wow, it feels so good that I'm not anti-Semitic. Those people don't get it. What a world we live in, right? Then you're taking the bait, and the conversation then is not about actual anti-war movements on college campuses, which at one point were a beautiful thing in American history. Ever heard of Vietnam? Right? We can't have that now. This is a distraction. And if you are fired up that, wow, I'm really not a racist and other people are, feels good to watch this and see how other people have it wrong, you might want to check yourself, because you're selling yourself a superiority complex in order to not talk about what. Now, surprisingly enough, CNN's Fareed Zakaria pointed this out over the weekend about how universities have just lost their credibility for free speech. So it's hard to believe them. And I was shocked that this take on not coddling students and actually allowing anti-war voices was aired on CNN. So let's give it a little time here on Redacted too.
A white man studying the American presidency does not have a prayer of getting tenure at a major history department in America today. Grade inflation in the humanities is rampant. At Yale, the median grade is now an A. New subjects crop up that are really political agendas, not academic fields. You can now major in diversity, equity, and inclusion at some colleges. The ever-growing bureaucracy devoted to diversity, equity, and inclusion naturally recommends that more time and energy be spent on these issues. The most obvious lack of diversity at universities, political diversity, which clearly affects their ability to analyze many issues, is never addressed, showing that these goals are not centrally related to achieving or sustaining or building excellence. Out of this culture of diversity has grown the collection of ideas and practices that we have now all heard of: safe spaces, trigger warnings, microaggressions. As the authors Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff have discussed, many of these colleges have instituted speech codes that make it a violation of university rules to say things that some groups might find offensive. Universities advise students not to speak, act, even dress in ways that might cause offense to some minority groups. With this culture of virtue signaling growing, the George Floyd protests erupted and many universities latched on and issued statements effectively aligning their institutions with these protests. By my memory, few took such steps even after 9/11 or during the Iraq War. In this context, it is understandable that Jewish groups would wonder, why do safe spaces, microaggressions, and hate speech not apply to us? If universities can take positions against free speech to make some groups feel safe, why not us? Having coddled so many student groups for so long, university administrators found themselves squirming, unable to explain why certain groups, Jews, Asians, don't seem to count in these conversations. Having gone so far down the ideological path, these universities and these presidents could not make the case clearly that at the center of a university is the free expression of ideas, and that while harassment and intimidation would not be tolerated, offensive speech would and should be protected.
Okay. So let us know what you think of this. I see lots of people saying they don't agree with our take on this or my take on it. Let me know why that is. Do you think that...
No, there's a lot of people that agree with you. There's a lot of people that disagree with you, but that's how we have a conversation.
Yeah, I want to know why. Do you think that universities should say that there should be no talk about an intifada or any criticism of Zionist reactions? Is that the...
Right, are you not allowed to speak out on genocide?
That's what, well, yeah. No, there's...
Right, but my
I
point
think that's the only
I'm
other
being sarcastic.
alternative, right?
I'm being sarcastic here, but I mean, if you went onto a college campus and said, you know, can we stop the genocide that was in former Eastern Ukraine killing ethnic Russians? Like if you were the only person probably on a college campus since 2014 saying, you know, no more of this, you know, you'd be yelled at and called a Putin apologist. You know, that's what you're labeled if you're criticizing that. So is this speech allowed? I mean, these universities are fooling themselves. And I agree with Fareed Zakaria. This culture of diversity, these free speech zones, these trigger warnings, these microaggressions, you better watch out. You better not do that to another student because that's a microaggression. They can't handle conversation.
So anyone who is applauding any kind of resistance in Palestine or resistance to to evacuations or whatever that is, right, and saying, no, fight back, keep your land, Gaza, then that is threatening to the Zionist government. And then that you extrapolate that that's anti-Semitic.
Right. Then you make the leap. And
they should not be allowed to say it.
Then you make the leap that you're also somehow pro-Hamas, a terrorist organization which beheads people and kills people. Like you're then pro-Hamas.
Right.
And then you're also then anti-Israel. And then you're also...
But these are huge leaps that we're not allowed to take, that we're taking because we can't discuss it. We only take those leaps because we can't talk about it.
Right.
That's why it's so important to be free speech absolutist and to protect free speech at all costs, because we have seen I remember a time when we would see something on Twitter and they're like, oh, China's blocking these words. And we're like, oh man, I would hate to be in China. That's never going to come here. But the more we let them take it a single ounce, like they can convince people, okay, yeah, you're right. We shouldn't allow people to say this because, yeah, that is pretty bad. Nobody's getting hurt, but it is pretty bad to say that. So we'll take that. Okay, we all agree. Now that we have that, well, now we got to take this because this also is making people feel bad. And it's like it just keeps going away more and more and more. And it's getting to the point where we're not going to be able to say anything. So that's why we have to protect it at its core, because we're losing it every single day.
Right. Yeah. And handing the rules of university over to Congress is terrifying. So for Congress to say, we want to pass a resolution to demand the resignation of these university heads, meaning now, I mean, already it seems like universities are parroting government talking points, but that will just be directly the case, that the Ministry of Magic is interfering at Hogwarts, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right?
Escape the Matrix says most of my comments are being removed here. Yeah, you know, YouTube is very big on censorship. So if you said something that YouTube doesn't like, they probably removed it. That's not us, though. So I see your comment, though, Escape the Matrix. But yeah, please be specific. Like if you just yell out, if
you're off base on this, or
you're wrong on this, then please be specific. Tell Natalie like what specifically she's wrong with factually. provide historical context, maybe even, reference different books and materials. We're open to this conversation, but to yell out, you hate Jews or you hate Palestinians, you're pro-Hamas, you're anti-Putin. It really is ignorant, let's be honest, right? And it just shuts down conversation. So be specific. If you make a charge, we're having a dialogue here. We showed you videos of Jews being attacked on campus. That's happening. So there's no denial of that.
And it's not allowed. It already was not allowed. We did not need Dolores Umbridge to grandstand about it.
And she's, by the way, making money off of it, and she's making tens of thousands of dollars from the Israeli lobby. You should pay attention to where these people get their money from. So when they're getting up there in front of cameras, and she knows the cameras are on her, she's doing this whole dog and pony show so she can look good to other people. So don't fall for it. Anyway, we should question everything, but we should have an open and honest dialogue about it. I loved something that Charlie Kirk did a few years ago. He went to a college campus and he sat there, and a person came up to him and said, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "Having a conversation." The moment we can't have a conversation is when we descend into civil war. And so we should all be able to have a conversation. You should be able to tell me the facts, present facts. We have a dialogue back and forth about those facts, and we come to a mutual agreed upon decision, hopefully, on how this unfolds. But right now, people are dying. Tens of thousands of people are dying. Jews are being killed. Jewish soldiers are being destroyed. They're being killed. We don't know what those numbers are. And Palestinians are being destroyed. That's what's happening right now. So we should be able to have a dialogue about it here on the show.
Right. And I guess I really take offense to these, oh, you just must not like Jews, or you don't like Israel, or you don't like... What I like does not matter. You shouldn't come here for that. You come here for journalism, for research. That's not... Almost nothing here I don't like that this is happening. I don't like the war. There's nothing to like. It's not for me to promote anything that I like. The only thing I really like are peanut butter and tortillas.
Right.
And that's not what you come to Redacted for.
It's all based on assumptions, too. It's like if you say anything about Biden on Twitter, then you're a Trump supporter. If you say anything about Trump, you're a Biden supporter. It's like if you say one thing to call out something that's going wrong with one group, that doesn't mean you hate the group. You're being critical of a thing that they're doing. And you're doing that because you want to see them stop doing that bad thing, and not because you hate them, because it's a wrong thing to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah,
right.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I think you should all want to know, why did so many people make millions of dollars off of the October 7th attack and made money trading stocks ahead of time? That should really piss a lot of people. I would love to know the people who were making millions of dollars off of that. They knew about it. That should anger a lot of people, but that's not even being talked about. In the mainstream media. That's being totally ignored. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.